brought to you by iOCO, Africa's leading integrated technology services company. It's time for Tech Talk. Now, web browser operator Opera Mini says that it has saved South Africans nearly 200 million rand in data costs over the last 3 years by employing data compression technology. Business Day's Mudiwa Kavaza is our tech guru, and he joins us to discuss the mechanics of it all. Mudiwa, thanks so much for your time this afternoon, and let's start there discussing the mechanics of it all. Opera Mini saying it saved South Africans millions in data costs. Talk to me about how it's done this.
Good afternoon, Taoleng. It's a very interesting one because the Opera Mini browser is a very widely used app on many people's phones. It's an Android-based app. And just like Google Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and others, it's basically an application that allows people to access, the web and websites and that sort of thing. But Opera Mini, which is based out of Norway, is actually famous for some of its compression technology, and is obviously one of the reasons why it's popular in South Africa, because it essentially makes web pages smaller, thereby reducing the rate at which data is consumed when people are surfing the web.
You talk about it being popular. I mean, how substantial is, the use of Opera Mini in Africa, in South Africa as well? I know that we don't have the exact numbers.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting one because around the world, they say that they have over 100 million users. But when we ask them directly how many users they have in South Africa, they would not disclose to us how many people are using the platform, simply saying that South Africa is one of their biggest markets with millions of active users in the country. And I can imagine that in a country like South Africa, where people are still sensitive to data costs and prices, I would imagine that, that you'd have millions. We just wish we knew exactly how many people were using this platform.
And, talking about Opera Mini and some of its other competitors, I don't know, maybe I just don't know about Opera Mini, or I don't use it as much. When I think of web browsers, I think of Google Chrome. You mentioned this. I think of Google Chrome. I think of Safari. I even think of Microsoft Edge. Even Firefox. I mean, what's this? Opera Mini is one of the last web browsers I think of. And I want to talk to you about market share. Do they hold, a substantial amount of the market?
Well, it is an interesting one. I can talk from personal experience that when I started out in the world of smartphones, Opera Mini was one of the first things I always used to download onto whatever phone I had at the time. This is many, many years ago, over a decade ago. They always had that reputation where, if you are like me, for example, a student, and you don't have a lot of money at the time, you're looking at how do you optimize, how do you save costs, and Opera Mini tended to be the way that you do that. So you then have a lot of penetration, for the cost-conscious consumer.
Yeah.
Of course, the more high-end you go in terms of, some of the smartphones that we're carrying around right now, then you see that there's less proliferation of something like Opera Mini. And as I said at the beginning, you tend to have it more on the Android side. And also on the cheaper devices as well. So I think that gives a flavor, of who this platform is actually targeted for. And then I think the other thing I'll just point at is the fact that they do a number of things, and they've struck a number of deals. For
Yeah.
example, in South Africa, if you are on the MTN network and you're using the Opera Mini browser, there are deals that they've been able to strike where you can use, a certain amount of, data-free sites, and you get certain amounts of data back. So it's not only the compression side of things, but it's also some of the deals that they've been
Mm-hmm.
striking to make that experience. So as you can imagine, for a good number of South Africans, it becomes a popular choice.
And talk to me about, its focus on Africa. I do see that it's making a lot of investments within the continent. You also spoke about some of the partnerships it's part of, one with MTN. I mean, of course, considering that, the digital divide within the continent is quite wide as well.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we even found this is because Opera Mini has just launched its AI tool called Aria in South Africa, and they're allowing use of it at a zero rated cost and price.
Okay.
So you can see that from a South Africa point of view, they are looking at South Africa as an important market where they, have to introduce some of these products. When you think about typical AI tools, your Chat GPTs, your Geminis, etc., they tend to carry some heavy data usage because you have these chatbots and you can go back and forth with them quite a bit. So
Mm-hmm.
in your interactions, you might end up actually using a lot of data. So you can see that them coming to the market with something like this, Aria specifically, and they're making it zero rated, that's a level of investment in South Africa, as well as, the African continent, to say, okay, fine, we see that, penetration will be good if we're able to do, some of these things. That's one. Two is the fact that and outside of South Africa, you also have a lot of the same dynamics that
Yeah.
are happening in a number of African countries. Yes, South Africa's data prices, having gone down by over 50%, are still quite elevated compared to other regions. But Africa is not a monolith. Some regions, like East Africa, your data tends to be quite cheap. Southern Africa is notorious for having expensive data, but other parts of the continent, you have in betweens, you have, things that are above or below the mean. So the browser is ends up becoming very popular on the continent because of that ability to save on the costs.
And you spoke about that AI feature, and I wondered to myself, is it not perhaps too late to the party? Because you do speak about, the chatbots that require a lot of data, but when you do use browsers like Google Chrome, right? I can Google anything and it already summarizes an article for me or something that I've Googled. That doesn't necessarily seem to use as much data as a chatbot would. Or am I wrong?
So it has to do with use cases most of the
Okay.
time. And as I said earlier on, when you are just experiencing some of the for now we're just gonna call them high-end tools, the chat gpts, your geminis, etc. They're so well integrated in some of the things that we're doing. You gave the example of just googling something and then Gemini is able to do that summary for
Yeah.
you. Stuff like that has become quite ubiquitous in a lot of people's lives. But one of the things that's there is that if you are more on the cost conscious side of things, you're not even trying to experiment with some of these things because in your mind you're saying, this might be expensive,
Yes.
before you even try it. So why not zero rate the platform completely,
Okay.
so that you can get more people to actually engage with some of the AI that's out there. Another good example that many people in South Africa probably exposed to are using is Meta AI,
Mm.
because it's an AI feature that's available inside WhatsApp, inside Facebook, inside Instagram. It's just sitting there, for whatever you want to do. But now Opera is saying, okay, fine, we've got this browser, lots of people use it. some people might be too afraid to even explore AI because they probably think it's too expensive. Let's do this as a way to, penetrate the market a bit more. And the other one to also think about is as you increase usage of some of these services, it's zero rated. And they often say in technology, if something is free, then you as the consumer are the actual product. And without being too cynical, that will likely be the case where, probably an advertising supported model will be something that's used, to subsidize some of these costs. Because yes, it's cheap, not cheap, it's free for you and I to use Aria, but Opera has to take on the cost and they have to make their money back one way or another.
All right, Mudiwa, thanks so much for your time and sharing those insights. That was Business Day's Mudiwa Gavaza. Do look out for this article on the subject in Business Day this week. Brought to you by iOCO, Africa's leading integrated technology services company.